Hi, I'm Sherry. My brother and sister laughed when I inherited Grandpa's old barn. They said it was fitting, like a joke written into the will. But that barn held secrets they never imagined. They lied to my face, forged documents behind my back, and tried to take everything, again. Why did Grandpa choose me? And what did he know that they didn't? I hadn't seen my siblings in 3 years, and now I remembered why. The mahogany conference table was too polished. Everything in that downtown Raleigh office gleamed like someone was trying too hard to hide something. Mr. Duncan, my grandfather's lawyer, gave a polite nod when I walked in. He was the only face I didn't want to slap. Elliot and Trisha were already seated, dressed like they'd stepped out of a corporate fashion magazine, reeking of smug entitlement. I sat down at the far end. No hug, no greeting, just a cold glance from Trisha and an eye roll from Elliot. "I see you're still into flannel and dreams," he muttered under his breath. I clenched my jaw. "Not today." Mr. Duncan cleared his throat. "We're here to execute the final will and testament of Martin Kellerman." My heart thudded. Grandpa was gone. The man who once taught me how to fix a broken fence post and roast marshmallows until they blistered. The man who used to call me Scrap because I was always picking up pieces left behind. Elliot smirked before a single word was read. He already thought he knew the ending. "As per Mr. Kellerman's final wishes," Mr. Duncan began, voice steady, "Elliot will receive the full investment portfolio valued at approximately $2.8 million. Elliot nodded like it was a given. "Trisha is bequeathed the vacation property in Outer Banks." Trisha crossed her legs, inspecting her nails like she was bored with generosity. "And Sherry," he paused. "Sherry is left with full ownership of the Kellerman barn and adjacent land." Elliot burst into laughter. "You're kidding," he said. "The barn, that rotting thing full of rat nests and regrets, that's what she gets." Trisha chuckled behind her hand. "It's fitting." I felt my face flush, but I didn't react. I wouldn't give them the pleasure. Mr. Duncan looked uncomfortable. "There's more?" "I think we're done here," Elliot said, standing up. "Thank you for confirming what we already knew." They left the room like they'd won something. Maybe they thought they had. I stayed seated, my hands gripping the chair arms like they were lifelines. Once the door clicked shut, Mr. Duncan reached into his briefcase. "He asked me to give this to you privately." He handed me a sealed envelope, yellowed like it had waited years to breathe. Inside was a brass key, and a handwritten note that read, "What they took from you once, they plan to take again." My heart didn't drop. It spiked. And suddenly, I remembered. 2 years ago, I was home for Thanksgiving. The air had been tense. Trisha avoided eye contact, and Elliot drank too much wine, even for him. I had stepped out for some air and accidentally overheard them talking on the back porch. "She doesn't know the loophole," Trisha whispered. "She won't find out," Elliot replied. "She never paid attention to anything legal. We'll have her name cleared before Dad even—" I had chalked it up to paranoia. Just wine-fueled gossip, right? Now that moment snapped into sharp, horrifying focus. They'd planned it. They'd known Grandpa might give me something, and they had tried to make sure it would be nothing. No one in this family wanted you to have anything, Sherry. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't crazy. I'd just been naive. Later that evening, I sat in my car, parked in front of the barn. The wooden structure slouched under the setting sun, like it was ashamed of itself. The brass key was heavy in my palm. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I just whispered, "If they want war, they've got it." Then I turned the ignition. Not to drive away, but to start something. The fluorescent lights in the courthouse hall buzzed overhead, a high-pitched whine that set my teeth on edge. It was the kind of space that smelled like stale coffee, fear, and arrogance, the last of which Elliot and Trisha brought in abundance. They dressed for theater, Elliot in a pinstriped suit that screamed, "Trust Fund Tyrant," Trisha in a cream power dress, her pearl earrings swaying with every exaggerated nod. I stood alone by the corner window, hands buried in my coat pockets, feeling like a faded extra in a show I never auditioned for. A local reporter hovered near the back, jotting things down in a notepad like this was gossip, not grief. "Let's begin," said the probate officer, tapping the microphone. Elliot got there first. Of course he did. We just want to confirm what was already made clear yesterday, he said, smiling for the non-existent cameras. My sister and I have accepted our responsibilities with gratitude. It's a shame the third party doesn't seem to appreciate the same. Trisha gave a sympathetic shrug. Sherry's always had different priorities. My mouth opened. Excuse me, she's the creative one, Trisha interrupted louder. She never wanted the burden of family assets. It's better this way. I could feel the eyes turn, not sympathy, pity, the worst kind of spotlight. I didn't ask for handouts, I said, trying to steady my voice. But this? She's just upset because Grandpa left her the barn, Elliot quipped, and it's barely standing. Laughter, from someone in the back, probably a friend of theirs. Mr. Duncan remained neutral, a statue in a tie. The one person who could have intervened chose silence. I left before they could steal more air from my lungs. On the courthouse steps, I gulped the cold January air like it owed me something. My palms stung from clenching them too tight. But this wasn't new. This wasn't the first time they'd made me feel small. It was Christmas Eve, 10 years ago. The table had been set like a catalog spread. White candles, roasted duck, the scent of cinnamon clinging to the corners of the room. I had just come back from a year in Haiti, dust still in my suitcase. My nonprofit fellowship had changed me, and I'd hoped, foolishly, it meant something to them. Elliot raised a glass that night and toasted, "To people who do real work." Trisha handed me my gift, a used blender. A sticky note taped to it said, "For your muddy smoothie missions." Everyone laughed. Even Dad. Grandpa didn't. He didn't smile. He just watched me, quiet, serious, like he saw something the others didn't. I'd said nothing, just smiled, and that was the night I stopped explaining myself to people who had no intention of understanding. Now, standing by the courthouse railing, I could still hear their laughter echoing behind my ribs. I pulled my coat tighter and reached into my pocket. The envelope Grandpa left me was still sealed in the glove box of my car. I hadn't opened it yet. I wasn't ready before. But now maybe I needed to see what he saw. The envelope had been sitting on my lap for the better part of an hour, its corners soft from my fingers running over them again and again. Outside the windshield, the last threads of daylight unraveled over the barn roof, soft orange caught on splintered wood and rusted hinges. I hadn't turned on the radio. The silence kept me pinned in place, as if Grandpa's words might sting less without a soundtrack. But silence was a coward's excuse. I tore the envelope open. Inside was a folded letter, thick with intent. His handwriting was steady, patient, the kind he used when he carved his name into wooden fence posts. "My Sherry," it began, "if you're reading this, then you've inherited more than a broken barn. You've inherited something they were never meant to touch. I saw what they were becoming, and I saw what you already were." There was more. A key taped to the bottom of the page, a short line in his faded scrawl. "This unlocks what they'll never see coming." My hands trembled, not with fear. Something else. The kind of ache that comes when you realize someone actually believed in you, even when you didn't believe in yourself. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I was in the barn, the key warm from my grip. The inside smelled like thyme, dust, aged pine, and the faint echo of something once alive. I moved to the study he kept behind the tack room, a forgotten space with shelves that hadn't been touched in years. There, behind a wall panel, hidden like a memory someone wanted to forget, was a small drawer. The key fit. Inside, journals bound in leather and worn at the edges, mineral surveys, a geological map with red marks scattered like constellations. Beneath the barn sat something more valuable than any of us had imagined. Rare earth. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. He had buried treasure under our noses, but not just gold or oil. This was strategic, scientific, vital. Not just wealth, legacy. He'd chosen me. Or at least, he hoped I'd figure it out. Later that day, I sat across from Mr. Duncan in his office. He barely looked up from his desk when I asked, "Did Grandpa own the mineral rights?" He tapped his pen, then finally nodded. "Your grandfather knew exactly what this land was. That's why he kept it from development. It's protected, for now." For now? I pressed. He looked out the window. Secrets don't stay buried forever, Miss Kellerman, especially not profitable ones. That night, I returned to the barn, my mind buzzing. The wind had picked up, rattling the loose slats in the siding. That's when I saw it, a black SUV idling just beyond the fence. Elliot. I walked outside, boots crunching on gravel. He leaned against the driver's side like he owned the place. Just checking in, he said, fake casual. I didn't smile. You were never good at pretending to care. He shrugged. Figured you'd be overwhelmed. Grandpa was sentimental. I narrowed my eyes. You read his letter? A pause. The silence thickened. You think you were the only one he wrote to? His grin was slow, knowing. We all had our moments with him. Some of us just paid attention. The implication hit like a punch to the throat. He had known. About the land, the potential. And he'd watched me flail through the humiliation, knowing he held the upper hand. You let me think I was crazy. I didn't let you do anything, he said. You just never asked the right questions. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Once he drove off, I locked myself inside the barn and unrolled the map across the desk. My fingers traced the red lines again. You chose me, I whispered to the walls, to the dust, to the ghost that hung heavy in the beams. But they were never going to let me keep it. I pinned the map to the wall. My grief, my doubt, the pain of always being the family's afterthought, it all folded into something sharper. This wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. This was war. I woke to mist coiling low across the fields, the kind of morning that made the barn look like it had floated up from some ghost story. The air held that sweet, sharp bite of earth after a cold night. I wrapped my flannel tighter and stepped into the barn, clutching Grandpa's notes like they were scripture. On the workbench, I spread out the geological surveys he'd left me. Every line, every symbol he'd drawn, meticulous. Not just the markings of a curious old man. This was a blueprint, a warning, or maybe an invitation. I spent the afternoon cross-referencing the red zones he circled against soil registry maps I downloaded from the state's archive. Something was there, not random, a pattern of minerals too concentrated to ignore. That night, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Lena, I said when she picked up, do you still test soil samples off book? There was a pause. Are we talking agriculture or something you don't want your siblings to know about? Let's just say this isn't about corn yields. We started testing under moonlight. Lena brought a small field kit and her quiet skepticism. I brought Ziploc bags and buried questions. She crouched beside the barn's northern post. You know, most people don't call me until after they screw up. I smiled. I'm calling to avoid exactly that. We worked in silence, trading glances every time the scanner blipped higher than expected. I didn't sleep again. When Lena returned with the results the next evening, her expression alone told me everything. This isn't a patch of luck, Sherry. This is a geological jackpot. I don't even think your grandfather knew how rich this land really is. The words hit different. It wasn't just about minerals. It was about my place in this story. Finally central, finally necessary. The barn hadn't been some nostalgic relic. It had been a shield, a secret. I stared out across the field, whispered to myself, he wasn't hiding from the world. He was saving it, for me. For once, I felt the ground beneath me wasn't trying to swallow me whole. It was lifting me up. But peace never lasts. A few days later, I drove to Durham where Lena was speaking at a geology conference. I sat in the back, sipping burnt hotel coffee, trying to look like someone auditing for continuing education. Halfway through her slide deck, a projected map flickered onto the screen, a topography of the region. And then it appeared, just for a moment. A red circle centered right over the barn. Lena quickly moved to the next slide, but it was too late. I saw a man in the second row scribble something down, then glance around the room. I didn't wait for the panel to end. By the time I got home, the sun had slipped behind the trees. A business card was tucked between the barn doors. No name, just a silver-embossed logo, a stylized mountain peak. The card smelled faintly of cigar smoke. That night, I sat on the floor of the barn, Grandpa's journals open beside me. I remembered something I'd skimmed over before, a line that suddenly felt loaded. Quiet interest has a way of becoming very loud, very quickly. It wasn't just me and Elliot anymore. Someone knew, and if they knew, I was already behind. I changed every password I had, set up motion sensors along the barn's perimeter, moved the maps to a locked drawer in my bedroom. Then I called Lena. "No more conferences," I said. "From now on, we say nothing." "You think someone's watching?" she asked. "I don't think. I know." Before I hung up, I returned to Grandpa's journal. The last line on that page echoed louder than any siren. "If this gets out before she's ready, they'll tear her apart." I locked the barn behind me. The wind howled through the trees like it knew something I didn't. Elliot never visited me unless he wanted something. That had been true since we were kids. Still, when he showed up unannounced at my small office in Austin, flowers in one hand, coffee in the other, I didn't slam the door in his face. I let him in. "Thought I'd bring peace offerings," he said with that half-smile that had fooled so many. "You always liked lilies, right?" He sat across from me like he hadn't tried to trick me out of my inheritance just weeks earlier. His tone was light, his suit crisp, and in his briefcase sat a folder that reeked of manipulation. "I've been thinking," he said, sliding the folder across the desk. "We don't have to be enemies. This land, Sherry, it could change everything. Together we could manage the mineral rights properly. I've got experience. You've got, well, the deed." I didn't touch the folder. "You flew all the way down here to help me out of brotherly love?" I asked. "I flew down here because I want to make sure you don't get in over your head." There it was. The folder sat untouched for hours after he left. I finally opened it late that night, poring over the proposal clause by clause. The offer looked fair at first glance, profit split, oversight balanced. But when I took it to a legal consultant the next morning, she raised an eyebrow. "See this?" she said, pointing at a small paragraph buried under subheading 12.4. "Signing this gives his firm retroactive rights to any discovery made on the property. That includes everything you've already found." I stared at the page. My stomach turned cold. "It's a trap," I muttered. "It's theft, dressed up in legalese," she corrected. Later that week, Elliot met me at a diner off I-35. I didn't wait for him to order. "You really thought I wouldn't read it?" I asked, sliding the shredded remains of the contract across the table in a Ziploc bag. He chuckled, low and unbothered. "You used to be so trusting, Sherry. So easy." "Yeah, well, you used to be better at pretending to care." His face didn't move, but his eyes narrowed just enough. "I'm not the same idiot who used to believe your apologies," I said, standing. "Try me again, and I'll make sure your name is the first one on the court docket." I left without paying for his coffee. That night I pulled every public filing I could find on his firm. Most of it was standard. Real estate law, arbitration cases. But then I found a Delaware holding company that had quietly acquired his firm 6 months ago, the same month Grandpa died. Lena helped me trace the chain. We followed digital footprints through obscure domains, shell emails, and offshore filings. Finally, a name emerged. Taoyuan Ventures, one of China's largest tech conglomerate-backed resource investors. Elliot wasn't the mastermind. He was the middleman. My hands trembled around the mouse as I clicked through their portfolio. Lithium in South America, cobalt in Africa, rare earth elements in disputed zones. And now, here. Of course, Grandpa had kept this quiet. He wasn't just hiding from family greed, he was protecting something far bigger. I stared at my land's outline, highlighted on one of their maps from an international mining conference. My land, not theirs. I called Elliot's voicemail. "You step 1 foot on my property again. I go public with every email, every clause, every offshore holding tied to your little game. You think this is a family feud? It's national security now." I hung up before I could hear the beep. That night, in the barn, I burned a second copy of the contract. The paper curled and blackened, the heat warming my fingers as ash scattered over Grandpa's worn notes. I wasn't his little sister anymore, and I wasn't playing defense. The barn lights buzzed behind me as I turned off the breaker. The gravel outside crunched, not loud, but deliberate. A black SUV sat just beyond the gate. No movement, just watching. That morning, I'd felt hopeful for the first time in weeks. I had just finished preparing a press kit for the land preservation initiative Lena and I were building, a proposal clean enough to catch the attention of green investors across the state. I'd even let myself think for a moment that maybe we were turning a corner. Then the headline hit. It popped up on my phone in the middle of replying to an email. Heiress of controversy, Sherry Kellerman's hidden past revealed. I blinked, thinking it was a joke, a bad one, but the logo wasn't satire. It was real, and already trending. The article was a smear campaign dressed as journalism. It claimed I'd misused nonprofit funds from a fellowship in Arizona, that I was being investigated by the IRS, that I had a history of emotional breakdowns and paranoid behavior. None of it was true. But that didn't matter. My inbox was full by noon. Clients paused contracts. A local school board where I volunteered asked to suspend my involvement pending clarification. Colleagues who used to champion my work quietly unfollowed me. I didn't have to guess where it came from. The author's name was familiar. Lisa Rogan, Trisha's favorite wine buddy from New York. Lisa had done paid blog work for anti-environmental groups in the past. Now she was calling me a public risk. I could have handled it. Until I picked my son up from school. He was quiet in the back seat, eyes glued to his phone. I asked if something was wrong. He didn't look up. Are you going to jail? I pulled over, turned around. He blinked fast. Jackson said his mom showed him the article. She said you were dangerous. That's when my shame morphed into something else. I spent the night digging deeper, tracing connections. Trisha had set this in motion. Lisa wasn't just a journalist. She was a pawn in something bigger. I remembered Grandpa's warning. What they took from you once, they'll try to take again. Lena confirmed my suspicions the next morning. There's more, she said on the phone. A complaint's been filed. Ethics board stuff. It's vague, but the phrasing matches filings from Ellington's office. Mark Ellington, Trisha's personal lawyer, a man known for throwing mud that never washed off. You think it's official? I asked. It's coordinated, she said. This isn't a family spat, it's strategic defamation. I sat at the kitchen table, staring out at the barn. I didn't feel like a victim. I felt hunted. And not just by them, by what they represented, their power, their reach, the system that never questioned men in suits, but turned women like me into punchlines. By noon, I had my own lawyer. By nightfall, I had a plan. I deleted my Facebook, turned my Instagram private, cleared every trace of personal life that could be weaponized. Not because I was hiding, but because I wasn't giving them more ammunition. And then, I wrote my own statement. It wasn't legalese, it wasn't an apology, it was truth. That evening, I stood in front of a single camera lens at the barn and read it aloud. My name is Sherry Kellerman. I'm a mother. I'm a conservationist. And I am the legal steward of a piece of land my grandfather protected from people who saw profit, not legacy. I won't apologize for defending it. If you want to know who I am, ask the earth I protect. The live video ended. I exhaled. My phone buzzed almost immediately. An unknown number. No contact info. Just a message. You should have stayed quiet. The night didn't breathe. The stillness outside my window felt unnatural, like the world was holding its breath for something I couldn't see yet. I sat alone in my home office, staring at spreadsheets that no longer meant anything. Recalculating mineral projections like numbers would keep me sane. But the silence wasn't just thick. It was wrong. My dog, Murphy, usually barked at falling leaves. Tonight, not a sound. That's when I noticed my phone, resting perfectly center on the windowsill. I hadn't left it there. And the drawer to my desk. It was slightly ajar. I always close it. Always. I stood slowly, heart thudding. The back door was unlocked. I locked that door every night. Every single night. My breath hitched. I rushed to the barn first, heart racing, afraid of what I wouldn't find. The safe looked untouched, but when I ran my fingers over the hinge, the edge was bent. Barely, but enough. Someone had tried to get in. I sprinted back inside, down to the office. 2 hard drives, gone. The security camera cables, cut. Clean, surgical. I called Lena, then the police. They were kind, professional, and utterly useless. No prints, no signs of forced entry. just the look in their eyes when I mentioned my family. They didn't say it out loud, but I heard it anyway. This woman's unraveling. They left. I vomited in the kitchen sink the moment the door clicked behind them. I remembered another night like this. My son was barely 4, curled on my lap, crying because Elliot had convinced my ex to file for temporary custody over a concern for mental health. That battle had taken 6 months and all the dignity I had. This wasn't about ruining my name anymore. They wanted to erase me. By morning, I was at Lena's lab, hands shaking as we combed through local traffic cams. A black SUV appeared in 3 frames from the night before, parked just far enough from the property line to be legal. We traced the plates. A shell company, owned by another shell company, owned by one of the firms connected to Elliot's legal group. "He's watching you," Lena whispered. "He's been watching you." Later that afternoon, I took my car in for an oil change, a simple errand, the kind of normalcy I was desperate for. But the mechanic called me over with a furrowed brow. "Ma'am, you got a weird device stuck under your dash. Might be a GPS tracker. Military grade, honestly." My stomach collapsed. They weren't just breaking into my house. They were following me. My first thought was my son. I left the garage without paying, floored it straight to his school, blood roaring in my ears. When I saw him through the glass doors, safe, alive, I could finally breathe, just barely. That night, I threw my laptop into the fireplace and crushed my SIM card with a hammer. Burner phone, encrypted email, no more bank logins from the same IP twice, no more routines, no more comfort. I wasn't just defending land anymore, I was surviving. I sat on the floor of the barn, staring at the red-stained map Grandpa had left behind. His note echoed in my mind. "They'll tear her apart." He hadn't been exaggerating. I was ready for battle, but not for this. The first knock came after midnight, not loud, just deliberate. I froze. A shadow passed across the kitchen window, slow, purposeful. I grabbed the bat by the pantry door, moved inch by inch, careful not to breathe, and then, through the dark glass, a voice, barely above a whisper. "This doesn't end the way you think." The room smelled like bleach and bureaucracy, beige walls, buzzing fluorescents, and a faint staleness that clung to the corners. I sat across from a state land board attorney who introduced herself as Miss Ridley. She was young, polished, and far too rehearsed. "We just need to verify some deed transitions," she said, flipping open a manila folder like it wasn't a loaded weapon. I smiled politely and handed over the packet James had helped me triple-check. I'd learned, never walk into a room like this unarmed. Legal armor was the only kind that mattered now. But then she slid something across the table. A supplemental document. An addendum to the mineral rights clause, she explained. Buried in the fine print was a clause so camouflaged it could have been invisible, a forfeiture trigger. If I signed the addendum as written, I'd lose the mineral rights, not just going forward, retroactively. I didn't sign. I didn't speak. I simply stood, tucked my documents under my arm, and walked out without another word. But inside I was screaming. Back at the hotel, an envelope was waiting for me, no sender, just a wax seal, blood red. Inside, legal documents, drafted months ago. The exact same trap, word for word. My signature printed at the bottom in looping cursive, but I had never signed. James arrived in under an hour. "This is a forgery," he said after scanning the document under UV light. "Someone tried to make it look like you walked right into the noose." A ghost firm, one that used to be run by a partner in Elliot's old law group. They'd built this months ago. The paperwork, the addendum, the whole thing had been waiting for me, like a chess move laid in advance. I sat on the hotel balcony, watching cars pass by beneath me like tiny choices moving through time. One wrong step, and I'd lose everything. Not just the land, myself, my son's future, my grandfather's legacy. But I didn't jump. I gripped the railing and held on. Later that night, I went back to the barn. Something had been pulling me there for days. I climbed the old ladder into the hayloft and scanned the beams, unsure what I was looking for until I saw it. A capped steel tube jammed behind the rafters. Inside, a note, yellowed, fragile, ink curling like a signature over time. It read, If you found this, they've made their move. The contracts were designed to test you. If you sign without reading, you're not the one. But if you're holding this, you are. I sat on the floor for a long time, knees pulled to my chest. He believed in me. He didn't leave me the land out of sentiment. He left it because I could see the trap. Because I'd read. I was never the mistake. I was the contingency. The next morning, I rewrote the deed entirely. Federal protections, environmental designations, a cease and desist order for Elliot's firm. I dotted every I and crossed every T. Then I signed. As my pen lifted from the paper, the barn's lights flickered. My phone buzzed, vibrating across the desk. Blocked number. You've gone too far, Sherry. This won't end well for you. I stared at the screen, let it go to voicemail, and whispered, I hope not. The conference room smelled like old wood polish and coffee left too long on a burner. The community center in Tulsa wasn't much to look at. Folding chairs, overused microphones, but it was packed. Local officials, reporters, my siblings, and the quiet buzz of people expecting something scandalous. I wore navy blue, not to look powerful, but to look calm. The attorney announced, this final hearing will determine full, uncontested ownership and future rights to the Kellerman property. I stood, presented my files, clean, dated, notarized, bulletproof. James had helped ensure every page was aligned. Then I handed over the forensic analysis, the forgery exposed, traced to a defunct firm tied to Elliot. A third-party graphologist verified my grandfather's handwritten letter as authentic. Across the table, Elliot didn't blink. Tricia clenched her jaw. The room shifted. You can both sign a declaration to cease contest, or we proceed federally, the judge stated flatly. They signed. Without a word, Elliot left. No glance, no smirk, just vanished. Tricia lingered. For a second it felt like she might say something. Her eyes softened, but she walked out, heels clicking like a countdown. A reporter approached, blonde, sharp-eyed, polite. Do you feel like you've won? I thought about it. The land, the minerals, the barn, the legacy. And then I said, I reclaimed my name, but the people I loved most, they lost themselves chasing what was already broken. Later I walked the barn alone. Clean now, restored, smelling of cedar and memory. There were voices outside, local volunteers helping prep for the community center's official opening. Laughter, music. I wasn't alone. Weeks passed. We opened as a heritage and conservation site. Teens came in groups, elders too. People curious about what could have been lost forever. One afternoon I found a letter waiting in the mailroom. No return address. Inside, thick paper folded neatly. My grandfather's handwriting. You read the fine print. I was right about you. I cried harder than I had in months. I taught my first class 2 days later. Legacy and Ethics in American Land Law. There was a moment, after the last bell, when I heard a student whisper to her friend, Can you believe that place was almost stolen from her? I didn't correct her. I just smiled. That night, I got a voicemail. Elliot. His voice was gravel and smoke. One day I'll tell you why I really needed that land. I didn't erase it. Sometimes what we inherit isn't just land or legacy. It's a test of who we truly are when no one's watching. I used to think the hardest part was being underestimated. But the truth? It was learning to choose integrity over revenge, purpose over pride. My grandfather didn't leave me riches. He left me a mirror. And through it, I found the courage to stand alone and still rise. So I want to ask you, what would you do if the very people you loved tried to tear you down? Would you fight, forgive, or walk away? If this story touched something in you, leave a comment with 1 or let me know where you're watching from. If it didn't, I'd still love to hear why and how you'd write your own ending. And hey, if you believe in stories that move hearts and open eyes, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I'll be here bringing the next chapter when you're ready.